The reviews are in for Cleopatra on Netflix, the docuseries, and it's getting hammered. It's one of the worst rated shows in the history of all shows. And to talk to me about this again is Aaron Sparrow. How you doing, Aaron?
I'm doing well, Wes. How are you?
I'm doing all right. It turns out that mocking people's history and making fun of them when they point out that you're not being accurate in your docuseries and basically telling people they're stupid isn't a great marketing strategy. In fact, the star of the series was also saying blackwashing wasn't real and laughing at people as well.
There's a lot of bad scores, but it is a bad show. I mean, it's produced by Jada Pinkett Smith, one of the most unlikable people, not only in Hollywood, but perhaps in the world.
She made Will Smith not cool. That was hard.
If she's bringing, well, not getting jiggy with it made him not cool. But what are you going to do?
Hold your tongue, sir.
I know that. I know that you were a big fan.
Don't act like getting jiggy with it was Wild Wild West. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, Wild Wild West. Oh, that was like one of my first big movies.
I'm talking about the soundtrack. The title track was awful.
And the movie was bad.
The movie was really bad.
But I think that your title, people, they wanted people to watch this Cleopatra docuseries. I think Cleopatra Gets Hammered would have probably been a more successful marketing campaign than going out and insulting everybody who might watch your terrible show. I get it. Like, you're going out and you're trying to do these, docuseries on different queens and things like that. But, the problem is you're doing a big period piece and then you do something like you do a race bait and switch. That's going to upset people. They're not going to watch it. It upsets Egypt, because that's their history, that you are now, aren't you guys the ones that love the phrase cultural appropriation? And now that's what you're doing. You're appropriating somebody's culture for your message of a black African queen that wasn't a queen that was black or African. We know historically what Cleopatra looked like. We know that she was Macedonian/Greek. These are things that we know from history. And when you go and you say, maybe not, because the producer, the director said, like, her grandma told her that, don't you believe what they say? Cleopatra was black. Oh, that's an accurate and dependable source, isn't it? Because my Nana told me.
Well, hopefully they're listening to IMDb, because the numbers are very bad. The series has an atrocious 1.1 out of 10 average from 42,000 users, with the vast majority, 94.5%, giving the series the lowest score possible, a 1 out of 10. That's as bad as anything I've ever seen. Period. It feels like all of Egypt showed up to let them know that they hated it.
I don't think anybody's going to be talking about this in about a month. The show is pretty much already fallen out of the top 10. The actors are out there online talking about, like, oh, we're at number 4. You number 1, here we come. And then, sad trombone noise. And then you start slipping down. Because I think the only people that tuned in for the first episode to kind of hate watch it. They saw what it was about. They saw how terrible it was overall, and were like, nah. And and got out. It happens. Hey guys, it happened to Rings of Power, and that cost like $1 billion an episode. So hey.
So they're going to claim that this is all just review bombing. People actually didn't watch the show. But if you go in there and actually read the reviews themselves, they get pretty specific about what's wrong with this. One user who gave the show a 1 out of 10 wrote, "It is hard to take this documentary seriously when there are errors in just about every scene. Ancient Egypt existed for 3.5 millennia, and the Ptolemaic period of Greek control and its involvement in Roman policies, especially the Roman civil wars, is a very specific period. For example, no Egyptian was spoken at the court. Greek was spoken. Getting costumes wrong, getting basic timelines of battles wrong, placing Cleopatra at events we know she was not present at, mixing up things done by Antony with things done by Octavian, and an unending series of errors just makes this impossible to watch. It is clear no experts, or even anyone with basic knowledge of the history of the time and place was involved. Or if they were, their advice was inverted. They put out multiple paragraphs explaining what's wrong with this, and that it's completely historically inaccurate while claiming to be a documentary series."
Yeah, and I also don't know if saying that, the people this is being review bombed, nobody actually watched the show. I don't know if that's an own. I feel like that's actually, kind of, underscoring the fact that it's bad, that nobody was interested in it, nobody wanted it. I mean, and this review, poor sweet summer child, he's saying, like, they got historical events wrong. They put Cleopatra, in places that she never was. Did you think you were going to get a slavishly, historic version of Cleopatra based on the casting? Because that alone should have told you they're playing it fast and loose and they just don't care.
Yeah, they're just making up history. And you can do that with like a period piece where you're changing the history around a character to make things more exciting or maybe more accessible to a modern audience or whatever. But once you claim it's a docuseries, once you claim it's a documentary, you actually have to provide real narrative because a lot of people are actually there to learn about history, not what you think history should have been.
Yeah, like you can do a Braveheart where you're doing a very fanciful version of historical events and people know that it's, a fiction. But, you call it a docuseries and people come in with certain expectations. They're going to expect you to follow what we know, what is historically accurate and what has been historically verified. And they have no interest in doing that because agenda is more important than accuracy. This is not the way it was. This is the way it should have been. And this is now the way that you should believe that it was because that's the way that it should have been. History is messy. And everybody going in and trying to clean it up and make it nicer does not do it does a disservice to everybody. It does a disservice to humanity. It does a disservice to us being able to look back on history and learn from it and move forward and change things that need to be changed. It's this whole rewriting history, I don't want to go back to like saying right out of the book 1984. George Orwell called it. And that's been coming up more and more lately. But it's been coming up more and more lately, and it's cliche now because all of these things are happening. The things that they're doing are cliche. So yes, George Orwell's observation of what they were going to do has become cliche.
You know what's weird? I'm used to people going back and trying to rewrite American history. Not just Americans. A lot of people around the world will try to go back and rewrite American history the way that they think it should be told. But not normally do they go back and try and rewrite like African history, Egyptian history. And I think people are starting to understand there's no like out of bounds for these people. If they think your history needs to be fixed, they will go and fix it themselves.
Yeah, they'll go in and they'll just, they'll tell all of Egypt to F off. Every Egyptian that's like, hey, no, this is part of our cultural heritage. This is part of our history. We're very, very interested in seeing this portrayed accurately and with respect. And they get told, piss off. They get told piss off by these directors because no, this is what we want to do. And, again, that's fine if you put something out and you say this is historical fiction. This is a fictionalized version of, based on historical events. And then everybody, they can still grumble about it, but at least you're not trying to present it as, you actually cared about the source material because you didn't.
Another person who gave the series a 1 out of 10 wrote, next, a documentary of Bruce Lee with a non-Chinese actor or a documentary of Nelson Mandela with a wider Asian actor could be the next politically correct idea of Netflix producers. Already previously historic documentaries of Netflix had 20% of non-historical facts, so who cares, right? History is made by the winners and producers, right? I was already thinking of canceling my Netflix subscription, so with that documentary that changes facts to adapt to its own values, I believe that I have taken my decision. It promotes more anger than serves any political correct value. There are a lot of famous and historically real persons of any race or gender that have changed the world for the better. They could show these. And I do think this user makes a really good point here, where you're going out there and taking history of something else to change it into what you would like it to be, while you're kind of brushing aside the history of people that should be being highlighted in a series like this. You actually don't have to go out there to grab Queen Cleopatra to make a great series about all the great queens of Africa, and you want them to be black. There are plenty of great black women throughout the history out there, but you're acting like they don't mean anything because obviously Cleopatra has like name cachet.
Yeah, why are you, if there's these great black African queens that you want to highlight and you don't feel like black African queens have gotten enough attention, why are you co-opting a queen that wasn't black when you could be telling the story of a lesser known black queen? If she hasn't had the historical recognition that you think she deserves, then that's the perfect vehicle for a show like this, where you're elevating somebody and you're actually sticking to the historicity of that person. But that doesn't have the name recognition of Queen Cleopatra, so we're not going to do it. We'd rather co-opt something that exists. It's the same thing we see in comic books, Wes. Hey, we can't create a new black character, a new gay character, and have them get over, so we'll just swap out the race of this character that has been traditionally something else, or we'll just take this character's sexuality like Tim Drake and all of a sudden make him bisexual out of nowhere and try to say that, oh, hey, you should be reading this because you're trying to glom on.
But it's a little bit different,
successful.
Aaron, when they're trying to shape and transform fictional characters to fit their agenda. And I still find it repugnant. I don't think it's cool, and I think it's kind of gross because I see through what they're doing. But in this case, I think this is 100 times worse.
Oh,
because
definitely.
These are real people. These are real events. These are people's real histories. that they want to erase because they don't fit the narrative that they wish history actually told.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's 1,000 times worse. I'm just trying to pull it back to your audience. See, is what I'm doing. We're talking to comic geeks here. So if anybody in is going like, I don't know what these guys are talking about, and then I go, it's like Tim Drake. They're like, oh, hey. I'm kidding, guys. I don't think that little of your intellect. I really don't. I'm just trying to defend myself against Wes. But yeah, no, it's 1,000 times worse. It's absolutely insulting when that culture then comes out and says, hey, we don't like this. And you tell them to shut up. You tell them their opinion doesn't matter. It's their history. Their opinion absolutely matters.
It's absolutely crazy. The final user that I'll talk about, who also scored Cleopatra a 1 out of 10, said, I just watched it and it was so bad. All I can do is laugh and cry because of how inaccurate it was. They made Cleopatra the 7th a warrior. First of all, she wasn't a warrior, and I also forgot how many times they said their opinions and ideas about how Cleopatra the 7th was when it was supposed to be actually historically accurate. Basically saying that during the docuseries, when the people were giving their opinions, or the historians or whatever, they were basically making stuff up to fit what they thought Cleopatra should be. And then, of course, she has to be a warrior because every girl is a girl boss now, even though when Julius Caesar arrives in Egypt and he gets taken prisoner by her brother, like, she is pretty much a kind of a kid at the time. Yeah. Certainly wasn't out there being a warrior. She probably did never see the sun.
No, it's, everybody has to be a warrior. Look at the Woman King. That's supposed to be, history as well. And then we found out all the actual history. And it was like, wow, you guys left out a lot of really terrible stuff to make this girl boss point, didn't you? I'm sure that, like, Zack Snyder is probably delighted to find out that 300 is now, a historical docuseries as opposed to just an action film. I suppose he's absolutely thrilled. I would be.
Zack Snyder's always looking for a little bit more credit.
Careful, you're going to have Fatal J up in the comments.
As far as I'm concerned, they got what they deserved. You went out there and you created a series, called it a documentary that wasn't historically accurate. They went out of their way to make it not historically accurate. When people called them on their BS, they mocked them, they laughed at them, they ridiculed them, they mocked their history and said, what the hell are you even thinking? You should be in line with us rather than respecting your own history or respecting the history of the world. Cleopatra is a pretty important figure in the history of the world itself, and certainly in the history of Egypt. Everybody hates it because it absolutely sucks and it's not accurate.
Yeah, activists think that they own you based on your skin color. You're not allowed to have any kind of thoughts outside of what they have commanded you to have. So you tell me where the racism lies. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I think that this show is definitely getting what it deserves. It's getting hammered. People are not watching it. It's going to sink. It's going to lose Netflix a bunch of money, and they keep going back to the well. This is a show produced by Netflix that has a worse reviewer score than Cuties. Just let that sink in. Let that sink in. That should tell you how absolutely terrible this strategy is, and yet they keep going back to the well on it. They keep doubling down on it, and they keep expecting a different result.
A few weeks ago, Aaron and I actually talked about the director of this Cleopatra docuseries and how she was going out and blaming everyone but herself for all the backlash and really mocking the shit out of people. If you haven't seen this and the way that she treated people, definitely check this out right now. It is absolutely terrible. There's also a link in the video description.